Hi everyone, in this video we're going to look at something called the DISC and how we can use it to connect better with our prospects and become a 4D salesperson. So what exactly is DISC? Well, DISC is an assessment test that provides insight into an individual's personality or behavioural characteristics. So essentially we're going to learn what makes us tick. Now it's used by many thousands of businesses and organisations across the world, and it's used to kind of help build more effective teamwork, improve working relationships, or helping salespeople connect better with their prospects. So what this essentially shows us is a kind of 4 different personality styles. You've got the dominant, the influential, the steady and the conscientious. And while everyone has each of the 4 styles, we usually fall in line more strongly with one particular style over another. So I'm going to briefly cover each of the 4 personality styles. But I recommend that you learn what personality style you lean more towards as well. Now to do this, all you need to do is jump on Google and type in free DISC profile. And then you're going to find a questionnaire. And you'll be simply asked to pick things that are most like you and least like you. And there's generally about 20 questions in it. You keep in mind that there's no right or wrong answer, and you should always go with your gut. So as I mentioned before, I'm going to cover each style. And a great tip to help you learn and retain each of the characteristics from each style is to try and imagine a person that you know that most closely matches each personality style. This could be a boss, a co-worker, a friend, or even a client of yours. So let's start with the D in DISC, which stands for dominant. Now, dominant people are self-starters and they thrive on both challenge and competition. They're usually very direct, positive and straightforward, and they tell it as it is, sometimes even bluntly. Now, dominant people like to take centre stage and they like to be in charge. And they fight hard for what they believe in, they can accept momentary defeat, and they're not long-term grudge holders. So does anybody you know match these characteristics? So let's move on to the I in DISC, which stands for influential. So influential people are outgoing, persuasive, gregarious, and they strive to make their opinions and beliefs prevail. They're incredibly comfortable in one-on-one situations, and their outgoing nature kind of typifies that so-called image we have of that natural salesperson. They're very easily met, they're name-dropping conversationalists who sell themselves extremely well, and they're friendly competitors and optimistic managers. So let's move on to the S in DISC, which stands for steady. So steady people strive to keep things the way they are and they dislike change, hence the name steady. However, once underway, they'll work very steadily and patiently. Steady people are very even-tempered, low-key and unobtrusive. They're good at concealing their feelings from others, and they apt to be long-term grudge holders. They can be very possessive and develop strong attachments for their things, their department and their family. And just like before, do you know anybody who matches these characteristics? And finally, we move on to the C in DISC, which stands for conscientious. So conscientious people are normally very reserved, conservative, but they're adaptable and open-minded. And they also like to proceed in a very orderly way. Their methods are usually predetermined. They're very precise and attentive to detail. So conscientious people strive for a neat, orderly existence, and they follow traditional procedures and established systems. Because we each have our own personality style that we lean more towards, there is a risk that we can become very one-dimensional regarding our selling style. So for instance, if you have a dominant style, you're probably going to be driven, straightforward, and you say what you think type of salesperson. And this is likely to be effective with dealing with other dominant individuals. However, a predominant, maybe steady style individual, they might find your dominant approach to be too blunt or too fast-paced. Or maybe you lean towards the influential style, and then you'll probably want to focus on getting to know your prospect on a personal level. Now, a prospect who also kind of tends towards the influence style may appreciate your enthusiasm or friendliness. However, those who lean towards the conscientious style might find it kind of off-putting, frivolous, or you're just being too forward. So if we can identify our prospect's predominant style, then we can adopt our approach to best suit their style. And this would effectively make us a 4-dimensional salesperson who could be all things to all people. So there's essentially 2 things that we need to know to become a 4D salesperson. And that is, how do we recognize the predominant style in our prospect? And the second thing is, what do we need to do to adjust our approach? So let's start with the dominant. How do we recognize a dominant individual? Well, when we meet them in real life, they may come across with a very firm handshake. And they may not want to sit down, almost prefer to kind of stand up and hover over you. And because of their straightforward nature, they want to get straight to the point, and they may come across as very blunt or somewhat abrasive. Dominant people can be very impatient, and frustratingly, they're just not going to give you a lot of time to justify your value. But I think overall, you're going to get a clear sense from this person that they just want to be the boss. So how should we adjust our approach? Well, we've got to be direct, and we've got to get straight to the point. We've also got to be brief and speak up, and we've got to avoid any long-winded presentations and refrain from repeating ourselves. We've got to respect the reviews and requirements, but we shouldn't be afraid to have a bit of backbone. And avoid focusing on them personally, always stick to the fact at hand. But what's very, very important with dominant people is they're very strongly influenced by other people that they perceive as having a high status or power. So when possible, use testimonials from other well-known people in the industry. So how will we recognize an influential prospect? Well, influential prospects generally come across as very friendly, social, talkative and extroverted. And they're not afraid to be in the centre of attention. And because recognition is a key word for them, influential people, they tend to be very sharp dressers or very brand orientated. So you might actually see this in what they wear, what they drive. So how do we adjust our approach? Well, we got to allow them time to ask questions and talk about what their ideas and emotions are. And we got to ask them what they're thinking and feeling. And we got to let them vocalize what's working and what's not. And whatever we do, don't interrupt them. You got to focus on the positives. And very important, avoid overloading them with detail. So influential people aren't very good with detail. And there's a danger if you introduce too much detail, you're going to take everything off in a tangent. So how do we recognize a steady prospect? Well, steady people may come across as somewhat reserved, non-emotional, and they tend to have a poker face, which makes them very hard to read. Also, they might make it clear from the get-go that they're just looking. But overall, you're going to get a clear sense from this person that they just don't want to be rushed. So how do we adjust our approach? Well, we've got to be polite, personable, agreeable, and we've got to make time to provide clarification. We've got to avoid being confrontational or too aggressive. And a key word for steady people is appreciation. So make them feel appreciated. Show them that you're interested in them as a person, and don't make your whole sales pitch feel too transactional. You want to make it clear from the get-go that you value their relationship above all else. And finally, try and avoid using any impending doom closing techniques. So how would you recognize a conscientious prospect? Well, conscientious prospects tend to come across as neat, tidy and organised. They're also very open-minded and diplomatic. And they might even ask you, why should I buy off you as opposed to somebody else? And even though they're very knowledgeable and very well researched, they will ask you lots of questions to compare and test your subject knowledge. And salespeople who don't measure up will rarely get the sale. So how do we adjust our approach? Well, we've got to allow time to get to know each other better so we can avoid any misunderstanding. We've got to be patient and be diplomatic. And we've got to make sure that we give them as much information as possible. Focus on the facts and details. So where a dominant personality type only wanted the bullet points, a conscientious person will crave the details and want to know all the reasons why. And also, give them all the information in your verbal pitch and writing. Knowing they can review all the documents later on and make an informed decision puts a conscientious person's mind at ease. So there you are, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed the video. And as I always say, if you like the content I'm putting out there, please go ahead, give me a follow, give me a like. And as always, good sales.